Rosemary Ellison, Senior Helpers, Union Bank, and Ventura County Credit Union. The Chamber and the City of Thousand Oaks value our relationships with so many outstanding local businesses and especially appreciate your support of this event. At this time, it is my sincere pleasure to introduce a man who is in his 20th year of service to the City of Thousand Oaks. He has resided in Thousand Oaks for 31 years, is currently serving his 5th term as mayor of Thousand Oaks, and in his day job serves as Assistant Fire Chief of the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Andy Fox.
Thank you, Leonard, for the warm introduction, and for all of you for taking the time out of your schedule today to come join us for our State of the City address. Before I begin, please join me in thanking, I don't know what it is about not applauding for a priest, but I noticed when Father Dave came up and left, nobody applauded, but please join me in thanking Father Dave for his invocation. Also want to say thanks and acknowledge our 2 sponsors and hosts today, California Lutheran University and the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce. We're seated here in the Gilbert Sports Center, which is a relatively new upgrade here at CLU. And they've had a number of upgrades. One in particular is a Starbucks. You're laughing now. The reason I mention that is I think everybody in the room knows this is our 50th anniversary as a city, and Scott Mitnick, our city manager, wanted me to cover the entire 50 years in detail. So what once was very brief remarks has now been expanded and edited to a 73-minute dissertation, so feel free to grab a cup of coffee along the way. Really, the Chamber and Cal Lutheran have been so important to our community, and I did want to again recognize both of them, and particularly their leaders, for hosting this event today. Cal Lutheran is an institute of higher learning that is a place where future scholars and leaders begin their lifelong journey of learning. And of course, the Chamber connects our community with business. So please join me in welcoming and thanking Chris Kimball, the president of Cal Lutheran University, and Jill Letter, the president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. This past year in particular has been a special one for our city. We are celebrating our 50th anniversary as a city. And as I thought about the state of the city and reflected about it, it's clear from the very beginning that our city had been guided and led by some dynamic leaders and city residents. Their strong collaboration with the residents and businesses, the nonprofits, many of which are here today, the school district, the park district, our religious and faith communities, outstanding city staff over the year, and past and present city councils, together, collectively, we have built a premier city. Let's give our city a round of applause. This is not just someone's opinion or words. We have facts to back it up. So let's look at exactly why folks choose to live and raise a family in Thousand Oaks. First, we recognize that year after year, the FBI ranks Thousand Oaks as one of the safest cities in the nation. And Joel and I, coming from public safety backgrounds, don't take that for granted. Today we have representatives, I believe we actually have the fire chief and representatives from the sheriff's department here. I'd like both gentlemen to stand, and we'd like to recognize you and the folks that you lead to keep our families and our business safe each and every day. Fire Chief Ted Smith and Jim Freihoff's back there. Thank you, gentlemen. Second, we're gathered here today on a campus of one of the finest liberal arts universities in the nation. Our public and private education opportunities from K through 12 all the way through college and university is as good, and in many cases superior, to those in very large metropolitan communities. Finally, And most important, this city, our city, for now half a century, has been blessed with people who care. Many are who are in this room today. Yes, we are a city that's proud of its schools, its safety, its landscaping, and of course, over 100,000 oak trees. But behind all of these achievements is a community of volunteers, people who give back. Los Robles Hospital, the Civic Arts Plaza, Conejo Open Space, volunteers in policing, Friends of the Library, PTAs, high school boosters, youth sports, scouting, faith communities, Rotary, Kiwanis, city boards and commissions. The list goes on and on. And these are just a few of the many ways our residents have continued to contribute to the success of our community over the past 50 years. From FBI stats to Blue Ribbon Schools, Amgen, J.D. Power, Tree City, USA, by any measurable standard, Thousand Oaks is a great city to live and work, to raise a family, and to open and grow a business. Yes, we are a premier city. So as we celebrate our 50 years as a city, it's fitting to reflect on our past leaders, those who helped shape our community. It was these leaders and their foresight and their vision and their political courage that made tough decisions early on. They implemented key policies that we all take for granted today, and they really started the quality of life that we enjoy here in Thousand Oaks. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge some of our former mayors who have joined us here today and thank them for their servant leadership over 5 decades. I'd like these individuals to stand as I mention their name, and then we'll give them all a round of applause. Dick Hoos, I know Dick is here. Chuck Cohen, Francis Prinz, Ed Jones, Larry Horner, Bob Lewis, and Judy Lazar. Please join me in acknowledging their service to our community. Now let's go back to 1964 and listen to some of our city's founders who started with a blank canvas and painted the first strokes of a still unfinished masterpiece.
It was a nice, rural, open area, very, very different than today. Almost 20,000 people lived in the entire Conejo Valley at that time. The issues at that time were still mostly how to set up and run a city, a new city. None of us had had any experience with that, except John Tapke, who was already a former director of planning for the county of Ventura. So John knew the political lay of the land and was a great help in getting us started. The issues were, I would say, primarily to figure out policies that would preserve what was here. The valley is just such a beautiful place with all the oak trees, and we could all visualize it becoming another San Fernando Valley if we didn't do the right things. So early on, there was a lot of attention paid to open space and preserving the trees and trying to make sure that what developed in the future would be pleasing to the people who came in the future. The basics were developed during those years.
The general plan was successful in the sense that we were able to come to agreement on its details in a spirit of cooperation. We were guided to do was to engage a company that does general plans. Again, the debate being, how many people are you going to allow into this geographic area? The tension on this number was always the question, we don't want to be the San Fernando Valley. This group was essentially escaping from the Los Angeles scene, but didn't want to be that far away so that they couldn't enjoy the benefits of it at the same time. Ultimately, the general plan, I think, it was somewhere about 250,000 people. That was reduced in that general plan to about 180,000. Some of us looked at the general plan as being a guide. Others looked at it as being the Bible. It was a vigorous debate, but the interesting thing is that we did it with respect, and we did it with dignity, and the night that we ultimately agreed upon the details of the general plan, we went out and had a beer together. And that's the way the city started off. And you probably couldn't find two guys more disparate on how they saw a city moving forward than Dick Hoos and I. But we continue to be friends, if not close friends.
Dick Hoos and Chuck Cohen. Let's give them a round of applause. Still going strong today. You know, as I was listening, I think I would have fit in nicely back in the 60s and 70s, particularly the part about going out for a beer afterwards. I think I would have liked being on the council then. So have you heard in our city's infancy, the 60s and 70s, the adoption of the general plan and essentially keeping the character of Thousand Oaks were the guiding themes. Do not become a San Fernando Valley. It's clear our founding fathers did a great job. Today, we have a population of approximately 130,000. We have a great balance of a variety of residential living options. And of course, we're surrounded by 16,000 acres of permanently protected open space. In the decade following our birth, major decisions about growth and development lied ahead. It's really hard to manage our community today without some of these projects. Let's hear now from some of the leaders of the 70s and 80s who were involved with these decisions, at the time, many controversial. In fact, some would say would forever change our city. And they were right.
Thousand Oaks was, at that time, a very fast-growing community. And if I had any single description for the individuals who lived here, it would be that they were very involved. We had a very activist community at that time. City Council met every week, and it was not at all unusual for the meetings to last until 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because we had so many issues, so many development issues, and so many people who spoke. The library was a very big issue. We had a very small library on Wilbur Road. I think it was like 8,000 square feet. Proposition 13 passed. The county said it didn't have the money to build a library in Thousand Oaks. And the city took up the cause and went ahead and built the library, which is over off of Jance Road. One of the hot button issues was open space. We formed an organization called COSCA, Caneo Open Space Conservation Agency. And one of its goals was to develop open space around Thousand Oaks, including a ring of open space around the city. That was a big issue. Growth. That was during the time, it was in my second term, that the growth initiative, the slow growth initiative, was passed by the voters because they were concerned about the rate of growth in the city. It was so rapid.
During the 16 years that I was on the city council, I was involved with every major policy and every major development that was destined for the city's future. And they were varied, but if I had to pick one that was probably both controversial and very necessary because it was part of the original master plan, was the development and approval of the Oaks Mall. That was probably one of the biggest accomplishments because there was so much opposition to it. And my feeling was, as a freshman on the council at the time, it's already been established that we need this tax base, sales tax base. That, to me, was always a deep concern, having enough tax-based revenue to provide and maintain the infrastructure that we were very proud of developing in the earlier years. There were threats, there were criticisms. I had, over the weekend before the hearing, between 74 and 76 calls that were more or less antagonizing and threatening to say, we want you to vote against it. There were 550 some odd people at the hearing that night in 1974, and the meeting was a marathon meeting. It ran all night to 6 in the morning. We had one council member that had to abstain because his wife had a conflict of interest. So all 4 of the other council members had to vote for it because it had to have a 4/5 approval. And we approved it. And at the night of the hearing, I had to specifically stand up and say, this is part of what the master plan called for. Our governing fathers said that we needed this type of facility to generate the tax revenue in order to run the city. So without question, with all of the conditions that we imposed on it, this would be a project that would work and is desperately needed.
Francis Prinz and Larry Horner. Let's give them a round of applause. So as you can see, the 70s and 80s was earmarked with a very strong dose of political courage and vision. As you saw, former Mayor Francis Prinz also mentioned the Cuneo Recreation and Park District and the birth of COSCA. The value of these agencies to our community is really impossible to overstate. Some notable partnership examples: the Teen Center, the Senior Center, and right next door, the CLU pool. It's clear decades of planning, focus, and leadership have resulted in a robust recreational environment, open space, a library system. We are the envy of many cities. While hiking and reading are in fact healthy hobbies, some have another hobby. This may have come as some surprise. Some people in this room actually like to shop. Yes, I'm looking at my wife. As you heard Mayor Horner talk about, the Oaks Mall was a critical decision for our city. He noted the importance of sales tax dollars, and that still holds true today. Sales tax continues to be our #1 source of revenue. Past decisions by our leaders to start a general plan and approve a general plan that included the Oaks Mall, the Jans Mall, the Auto Mall. These were not popular decisions to some at the time, but they have stood the test of time. Today, we face similar decisions regarding Thousand Oaks Boulevard. These businesses make it possible for the city to provide the services all of our residents have come to expect. Shopping malls and open space, parks and libraries are just some components of a healthy community. But in the 1980s and 90s, residents and civic leaders got together and they inspired our city council to add an equally important component to our community: the arts. And in the 3rd decade, the Civic Arts Plaza was the topic of much public interest, and once again, our community leaders showed great courage and vision. Let's watch.
I kind of viewed the community in that. I kind of viewed the community in that time period as somewhat in a transitional time period. We were moving from a small city to, at the time I was mayor, we reached 100,000. And in fact, that year, first year we were 100,000 in population, we were the safest city in the United States. That growth, and the growth was an underlying feature both when I was on the Planning Commission and the City Council, was that, that resulted in a very active, vocal community. Planning Commission hearings, City Council hearings, every week they'd go till midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. They were very long. You had people passionate on both sides of an issue. Almost everything had an issue. Probably the most contentious hearings related, when I was on the council, related to the building we're in right now, the Civic Arts Plaza. And that, again, had to do with where people saw the vision of the city, and were we becoming a big city, or were we losing our small town character. This city had no performing arts facilities at all. There were no performing art facilities at the high schools. There was nothing. You wanted to see a show, you went to Los Angeles. You wanted to listen to the symphony, you went to Caneo Symphony, listened to it in the gym at CLU with all the acoustics of a good basketball court. So there was a major cry for a place for the community to go to. And if you look at every city in this country has an auditorium that's used 2 nights a week. City Council, Planning Commission. Other than that, it's empty. So we created, okay, here's the ability to create a small theater. All we've got to do is put a proscenium arch in, put a stage behind it. And we created, now we've got a place that can be used 7 days a week for smaller events. But we also, our studies showed you needed a large auditorium to financially support it. It wouldn't work. We went with 1,800 seats. If we had to do it over again, I would have gone larger. But the controversy was so heavy, we just backed off. We set down some criteria. One criteria, for example, was women's restrooms. We required the restroom capacity for the ladies to be 3 times code. Fought that heavily with the architect. I mean, he just kept saying, but that is code. And I looked at him, I remember looking at him and going, maybe code's wrong. Because this is not a building that just people kind of go during the day. It's all now, then it's none. Just some simple examples of a lot of type of discussion. But that's part of what I know a lot of people don't realize is the amount of time our council members and through today spend doing detail work that is behind the scenes that has to be done to enable things to function.
When you look back, the 90s and the 80s were periods of time when the city was still growing. And there were many people who were here in the 50s and 60s and 70s who saw the changes and were not necessarily on board with the growth of the city. They thought it was going to remain ranch land. In the early 90s, the city had a plan for the upgrading of the city's wastewater treatment plant, the sewage plant. It required a lot of money, and it raised a lot of controversy from some people, especially some members of the council, who felt that this was going to be a way to increase the population of the city. That was not the case. That wasn't the intention. We were trying to meet federal standards. We already had a very good treatment plant, but we could see the future coming and wanted to take care of it before it became a problem. Unfortunately, in order to do this, we had to have a 4/5 vote. We didn't get that. We couldn't get it. We tried many times. We brought in experts from everywhere, and getting that 4th vote was almost impossible. Unfortunately, the treatment plant failed around '96, and we had a major storm with El Nino that blew out a part of the wastewater system and caused a spill that the city was severely fined for. The vote finally came, but it was, a day late and a dollar short. And the work has been done as originally planned. The city has not grown beyond the planning that was expected then and projected then, and it still hasn't. It's still within those parameters. Sometimes things don't run smoothly. Fortunately for Thousand Oaks, we have been able to get through all of those issues and get things accomplished.
Bob Lewis and Judy Lazar. As you heard Mayor Lewis talk about the Civic Arts Plaza and the community debate, he also mentioned that even back in the 80s, Thousand Oaks was already being mentioned as one of the safest cities in the nation for a population over 100,000. And Judy talked about our wastewater treatment facility. Today, I'm proud to report to you that our wastewater treatment plant is 100% energy independent, meaning it runs 100% of the time on its own electricity. What a remarkable achievement. Let's give those folks a round of applause. As we look a little farther in the 90s, we're going to hear from an individual that certainly in this room, on this campus, needs no introduction. He's our former police chief, former member of the Park District, the council, mayor, former vice president of administration of this institution, really everyone's friend in this room, Dennis Gillette.
Thinking about over the 14 years that I was on the council, 3 items came to mind. One of those items that I had was the agreement with the Conejo Valley Unified School District to establish a $5.2 million fund that resulted in the rehabilitating of the tracks, infields, and facilities for fans and athletes at all 3 Thousand Oaks high schools at the same time. The funding for the widening and rehabilitation of the 23 freeway. Tight times, tight money, tight federal money, which we needed and what have you. Our Congressman Elton Galley was extremely helpful in getting us $50-some million in federal money to help move that project and get it completed. By doing so, alleviated significant congestion, especially during the commuter hours through the community, through the city. And the third one was creating the public-private partnership between the City of Thousand Oaks, the Conejo Recreation and Park District, and Cal Lutheran that resulted in the exceptional public swimming pool facilities on the campus at Cal Lutheran. And it became the kind of quality facility that we came to expect in Thousand Oaks.
Dennis and Terry moved to Spokane, Washington, and I know he's here in spirit today. Let's give him a round of applause. Our city has been fortunate to elect leaders who instilled a long-term vision and responsible measured growth that actually changed our community. It's great to see through these collective perspectives and viewpoints how our city was shaped for 50 years. As we've seen, our past leaders face challenging issues that at times seemed monumental and in some corners politically unpopular. But they laid an important foundation on which our city is still building today. Over the most recent decade, while we did not approve a new mall, we did approve a major renovation. We didn't build another university, but we did construct a sports and aquatic center and new contemporary student housing. At the same time, we're still facing new challenges. We are 50 years old. We have an aging infrastructure. This ring of open space that we are so proud of, it requires maintenance. We still have housing issues, water, and transportation challenges. So over 50 years, while much has changed, you can see much still remains the same. Devoting resources to projects that generally don't get national headlines, like some of the stories we've seen the past year, including a white cobra on the loose, and most recently, a man with his mules camping on Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Nevertheless, infrastructure, boring as it may be to some, is the flesh and bone of a healthy community. And if infrastructure is flesh and bone, Thousand Oaks Boulevard has to be our backbone. The boulevard, with its business, its commerce, and services, it's what connects us. It makes all our systems work. Our new TO Boulevard specific plan provides an exciting opportunity for contemporary building design, mixed-use housing with retail, people-friendly streetscape, and parking options that will create and encourage a pedestrian-oriented boulevard that every community attitude survey for the past decade has asked for. While other cities have struggled, Thousand Oaks has stood up relatively well, even with shrinking resources and the elimination of redevelopment. Our local economy, thanks in large measure to the Chamber and its members, has placed us in good position for renewed economic growth. Growth is good. It brings jobs, it brings investments, and it brings other positive things to our city. But economic growth alone does not make for a financially healthy city. It also brings increased demands on city services, which raises the question, how do we pay for it all? Our city's financial strength is no accident. It has been achieved through a combination of solid financial management from professional staff, combined with conservative fiscal stewardship on the part of the council. During this last decade, this has equated to some very tough choices at the city to make sure our budget is balanced with revenues sufficient to cover expenditures. This is becoming more and more challenging every year. Over the next few weeks, our city will be finalizing a financial strategic plan. This document is intended to ensure our city operates effectively in the long term. Ladies and gentlemen, this city has shifted. It is no longer a growth-oriented community. It is now a maintenance-oriented city, where growth and revenues and the ability for city to maintain high service levels, it's not a given anymore. We are not on autopilot. Long-term financial planning is no longer a luxury for wealthy cities. It's a basic requirement. Any responsible city has to do long-term financial planning to prepare for the future. As I mentioned earlier, we're celebrating 50 years as a city, and at the same time, 20 years with the Civic Arts Plaza, celebrating their anniversary. This year has been filled with a lot of cool events, special programs commemorating both milestones. The Amgen Tour of California, special performances at the Civic Arts Plaza, a time capsule dedication, and most recently, an historic community parade. These are just some of the most memorable events during the past year. But 2014 has not just been a year of parties and parades. It was also a year of civic engagement with a community-led visiting process called Project 2064. Over the past 6 months, we have engaged the community in a new blueprint for the next 50 years. Council members acting as facilitators for 5 different focus groups, including the environment, economy, infrastructure, municipal services, and civic and community involvement, all work together, meeting once a month. The visiting project has inspired a new generation of civic pride and community involvement that our founders would have been proud of. Meeting attendance at these meetings has been great. Over 325 participants for 6 months worth of meetings. This act of participation and enthusiasm displayed is a tribute to our engaged citizenry. You heard Judy talk about earlier, coming full circle from the 1960s to today. Project 2064 wrapped up just last Saturday with a group session that we had over 100 attendees who gave up their Saturday morning during the holiday season to come together and discuss and make recommendations on future policy subjects like fiscal resources, housing, environmental sustainability, technology, and senior services. Running through the core vision is the belief that Thousand Oaks, we want every resident to participate in our success. Now is not the time to become complacent. Like our city's founders, we need to embrace the qualities of vision, inclusion, courage, and yes, compromise to ensure our continued success over the next 50 years. As I conclude my remarks this afternoon, I want to acknowledge my colleagues on the City Council. First, Mayor Pro Tem Al Adam. I was had to fill in a couple of times, unexpected on a few, due to some family emergencies that occurred along the way, and I personally want to thank Al for filling in and doing a great job. Also, Council members Claudia Bill de la Pena and Joel Price. I want to congratulate both of you on your election and re-election to the City Council. And of course, we want to congratulate Jackie. While she's not here, I know she's here in spirit. Also want to give thanks to my wife Letitia, our kids for their support over the years, and a outstanding and great city staff. These are the folks that do the work every day. We get to take most of the credit, but Scott Mitnick and the executive staff, right down to the folks that trim the trees, they do a fantastic job. I'd like you to give our city employees a round of applause. It's always a great honor to serve as the Thousand Oaks mayor. With that, I'd like to also extend my appreciation to the residents of our community who once again put trust in all of us to help lead our community. On behalf of the council, I want to wish all our residents a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and a happy and healthy, safe New Year. God bless you and your families and the city of Thousand Oaks. Thanks very much.
Great job, Mayor. Thanks. Got the